Last time we were looking at Revelation 13, verse 9. Whoever has ears, let them hear. The message that's intended to be heard shows up in the following verse, in verse 10. If anyone is to go into captivity they will go. If anyone is to be killed with the sword they will be killed. Now, that's the message, but not the end of verse 10. Verse 10 continues, this calls for patient endurance and faithfulness on the part of God's people. You see, the last phrase clarifies as it specifies. The grim words pertaining to captivity, sword, and killing pertain to God's people. As we saw last time, those with ears to hear is usually a designation or trait of believers, not unbelievers. It's a surprising application. The words to be heard seem to be drawn from, or at least allude to, Jeremiah 15. Which begins, then the Lord said to me, even if Moses and Samuel were to stand before me, my heart would not go out to this people. Send them away from my presence, let them go. Are not these the words of judgment delivered to God's rebellious people? Verse 2, the Lord continues, and if they ask you, where shall we go? Tell them, this is what the Lord says. Those destined for death, to death. Those for the sword, to the sword. Those for starvation, to starvation. Those for captivity, to captivity. Do you see the connection? Yet here captivity and sword appear as the consequence of their actions. Later in Jeremiah 43, we come across similar words of judgment, this time not to God's people, but to Egypt. He will come and attack Egypt, bringing death to those destined for death, captivity to those destined for captivity, and the sword to those destined for the sword. Again, captivity and sword seem to reflect God's judgment upon the rebellious. And why, in this case of Revelation, is it spoken against the faithful? Maybe equally confusing, why do we find these words sandwiched between descriptions of the beast of the land and sea? I've mentioned this before. Just because a vision in Revelation is drawing on an Old Testament allusion, it doesn't mean it's using it in the same way. In fact, often it reverses it. What seems to be happening in our text is a confirmation of the first half of verse 7. The beast was given power to wage war against God's holy people and to conquer them. I mentioned in a previous devotional, the word conquer is $1 million word in the book of Revelation. In Greek, it's nikao. The beast here is said to conquer the saints through killing and captivity. But notice in Revelation chapters 2 and 3, where we come across the phrase, whoever has ears, let them hear, 7 times over, either shortly preceding or following each instance, we come across the phrase to the one who is victorious, followed by a promise like chapter 2, verse 7, I will give the right to eat from the tree of life, which is in the paradise of God. Now, victorious in chapters 2 and 3 is the way the NIV has chosen to interpret the Greek word nikao. Reading chapters 2 and 3 is essential for our understanding of 13 verse 10. You see, when we come across he who has ears, let them hear, John has taught us to understand these are the words of the Lord. Specifically, these are the words of the Lord to the church. Now, what we have been taught to expect immediately following is a reference to conquering. Thus, the captivity and killing work of the beast, his conquering, guess what? It's the very means with which the saints will conquer him. The beast's victory is his defeat. The defeat of the saints is their victory. This is a message that requires patient endurance and faithfulness. He who has ears, let them hear. Have a great week.